Hi everyone, welcome to the Vortex. It's Christine, your lovable, huggable muse. And today, guys, I just kind of wanted to do a topic that I talked about on a live feed on my Facebook channel, which was the 5 ways to hold space for yourself and others. And usually, you guys, when we talk about holding space, we really just kind of think about it as being able to assist someone when they're going through a difficult or painful time in their lives. And we usually never think about holding space for ourselves. And I always say to you guys that it's really hard to do for other people something you can't really do for yourself. I mean, if you're not necessarily kind or loving to yourself, it's really hard to reflect that to other people. Because everything really starts here. I mean, as much as we like to think our environment is affecting us, it's really our possessions in here that can affect our environment. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to go over this. So I'm going to be posting an article that I summarized on the 5 ways to hold space for yourself and others. I did 5 steps rather than having you remember 10 or 20. It just thought it'd be easier that way. So you guys, the 5 ways to hold space are: 1, approach it in a non-judgmental way. 2, listen without ego. 3, give them and yourself a safe space. 4, empower yourself and others. And 5, create a vessel that you can put it all in. Just make it more manageable. So the number 1 way, you guys, to hold space for yourself and others is to pretty much approach yourself or that other person in a non-judgmental way. I mean, I can even admit, you guys, that this was very hard for me when I was going through my own things in life and I was dealing with unresolved issues. It was actually really hard for me to see other people's situations without the ego being involved. A lot of times I would internalize conversations and think that it would have to do with me. So when it comes to just approaching someone in a non-judgmental way, it's just so important that you just don't think of things as being bad or good, that there is probably a good reason why someone decided to do something. You just kind of have to take all factors in when trying to understand someone else's story or when you're trying to be there for someone. Number 2, you guys, listen without ego. And I really listen. I mean, this is one of those times when you really don't make it about you. It's really about them. And really, it is normal to engage in other people's stories and come at it with our own personal experiences because, of course, we only understand our narrative in our own way. I mean, it's really difficult to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And to be honest, it is, in fact, no one else really knows what's possibly going on with someone else besides that other person. So when you're giving someone else advice, it is so important to really listen to what their wants and needs are and take yourself out of the equation, because it's a lot more unconstructive for that person to give advice that isn't necessarily catered for them. And that goes into number 3, guys, which is have a safe space for you and for them. So, when someone is telling their story, there's always going to be a lot of fear in there for the most part, especially when they might go into a place where they don't feel so comfortable. They might feel a little bit more vulnerable. They might worry about what others might be thinking, or if they're going to get any negative results from telling the truth. So when you're giving them that safe space, it's going to be with, so they don't have to feel like they're gonna get any judgment or ridicule, or someone else's ego being involved, or someone really trying to make something either right or wrong for them. And one of the reasons I just think this is so important that you just give someone that safe space is because in order for anyone to really progress in their lives and move forward, they need to be able to let go of things in their past, and they need to really just be here in their present. But if they can't get past that because they're just too afraid of telling their story, because it's too difficult, because it brings up um, these uncomfortable emotions, or it just puts them in a place where they just feel like they're having a negative experience. It's one of the greatest barriers on someone's progression in life. I mean, even me, I really necessarily feel comfortable when sharing my story to anyone for a very long time. I mean, there was definitely a lot of shame and guilt there, and that's one of the reasons I was really never able to progress, because authenticity has a lot to do with speaking your truth. And if you can't speak your truth, you're never going to be in touch with your real self. You're always going to disregard who you really are. So then the things you really want in life aren't as important. Um, you know, you start not trusting in yourself, because being centered and being in alignment with source is really where all those things like confidence and self-assurance comes from. And that's one of the reasons why I think this step is really so important. Especially after what's going on with COVID-19, everyone, we're really at this point where there's so much uncertainty out there, and things are just out of our control. That's really causing a lot of uncertainty for some people. And I'm sure there's so many things we're all facing right now that we're just really not too prepared to face. That's literally why I'm decided to do my blogs and my feeds. I could just see that people out there that were finding that they had to hold space for someone else, and a lot of times there's really no answers on how to do that, and there's just not the resources. So I just wanted to give you guys just those tools so you can do that, not only for yourself, for other people too. So number 4, you guys, empower yourself and others. Number 1, definitely don't take away other people's powers to make decisions for themselves. I mean, it's definitely so important for people to be able to figure things out on their own, and for them to know that they're the ones who accomplish that. I mean, me as a parent, um, my ego was definitely always in my parenting. I mean, I always wanted to make sure that my daughter was always making the right decisions, and I was always afraid she would fail or do the wrong thing. And her guidance counselor actually told me, well, she'll learn her lesson then. And that is a harsh truth for some of us. I mean, the fact of the matter is, when it comes to people finding solutions and answers for anything that's going on in their lives, it's really not up to us to solve other people's problems. Really, what we should be doing is just empowering them to be able to solve their own problems and find their own solutions. There's so much magic in that. I mean, you're basically giving someone the self-confidence to be able to do it on their own, which I think is way more amazing than just always doing things for other people. A lot of times when you do that, when you just enable people, sometimes you're subconsciously telling them, hey, I don't think you can really do this for yourself, or hey, you might always be needing someone to help you. And I always want people to feel empowered, because in my life, I did not have that for a very long time. So I absolutely think it's just a lot more positive and progressive to be able to tell someone instead that, hey, I'm sure you could figure this out. And I'm sure that you can find a solution for this and just give them some positive encouragement. Let people make the decisions, fail every now and then, and just be there for them when they do. But, definitely enable them, because it would make their development so much more better. And it's almost a more loving thing to do sometimes. I mean, my favorite saying, and I think my grandmother actually said this, was give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So, I would just love that for everyone to be able to, not be so dependent on other people from everything, from their inner development to their livelihood to what makes them happy. I mean, all that should really come from self and source if it's really going to be genuine. And number 5, you guys, help that person or even yourself create a vessel to put it all in, so that you can kind of look at whatever issue you're facing in a more constructive way, and compartmentalize it so it's easier for other people to kind of understand and see too. So I actually talked about this with my life coach, about, how we were holding space for each other. And whenever we were talking about that, I was just imagining holding a cup or a vessel kind of filled with all these things I ever worried about and issues I was dealing with. And I did bother to go online as well, and I found several resources, including the one in the article, where it talks about having to create like a container or a vessel to put all those worries and problems in, and just to be able to compartmentalize it into this kind of smaller container rather than it being all over the place. So you can really look at it. It starts to not look so overwhelming, and I think it's also really helpful for others with you to kind of understand what's going on and to even help you hold that container from time to time. I mean, I think problems are just so much harder to deal with when it's just expanded and so huge like that, and it starts to get overwhelming. And, but when you're putting it into the smaller container, it doesn't matter how big that problem was. You know what? The laws of physics does not care, all right? It doesn't, those kind of things don't even exist in that world. I mean, I read somewhere one time that, the universe, if you actually, it's expanded so big that it's really made of these tiny, tiny, tiny particles. And if you ever just like, condensed it and you really just like brought it back together again, all the particles, and fit it as tightly as you could, it literally wouldn't even be the size of a pea, like a pea. And when you just look and imagine how the universe works like that, and literally how it really makes you think how amazing that it could be so small, but also amazing that there could be so much power in it. So, it really helps you to kind of look at your problems and just realize that it's going to be easier for you to work with when it's more manageable for you. And, I know, there's such an overwhelm, you guys. This is probably one of our first major problems we've ever experienced in our lifetime. And I know it doesn't necessarily seem like it right now, but, I do believe that, we will get through this. And I just want you to all know that right now. I just challenge everyone to go higher in their thinking whenever they're feeling down or whenever they're just not feeling right with themselves. I always challenge you to go higher. And there's so many ways to do that. I'm going to definitely post some of my meditations and just some of the articles that I've read down here. But I do want to thank you guys for joining me today. If you enjoyed what we talked about, feel free to like and subscribe. You can always personal message me as well if you have any topics that you want me to do a video on, or if you have any questions. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. I always absolutely enjoy our time together. Love and light, everyone. Bye-bye.